Chapter 61. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 61. How do you want to play? Author. Purple Peony Machine Translation. He Longine held the steering wheel and struggled for a long time in her heart. He drove the Hummer H to Zhongshan Road and leaned against the side of the road. She held the car keys and hummed a tune as she walked briskly. The ponytail behind her head swayed along with her movements. She was so proud and cute. Miss He. Xiao Hanya followed behind her. When he saw her eyes twinkle, he couldn't help but take another look. He didn't know why her eyes were like stars, crystal clear, as if they could purify people's souls. She threw the car keys and took him around 2 alleys. Not far away, a white BMW drove past. With a screech, it braked and rolled down the car window to look at the figure not far away. He Longine. How can it be her? He Ruoxue took off her sunglasses and looked at He Longine's tall figure. There was a man beside her. She could not see his face clearly from too far away, but his back had a kind of magic, causing her to be absent-minded. He Ruoxue pushed open the car door, put on her coat, and quickly chased after her. From afar, He Longine picked a seat and sat down. The man even helped her wipe the chair. The two of them seemed to be very close. How come I didn't know that she has other friends besides Qin Nan? He Longine, you be *tch, you said that I was your savior, but you kept everything from me. You're really amazing. He Ruoxue felt indignant in her heart. She felt that He Longine treated her with pity from the beginning until the end, like a beggar. He Longine, you said that from now on, we are one life, and there is no distinction between you and me. But have you considered my feelings? Even if I change my surname to He, I am still just a dog in your family. Now, I don't even know that you have another man of the opposite sex. How can I believe you? He Ruoxue said with a cold smile. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that He Longine treated her like a dog. Those LV bags, Chanel suits, and branded clothes were all given to her by He Longine because she felt that the brand was not good. She was furious. He Ruoxue was so angry that she clenched her fists. When she turned around, she saw a group of ruffians sniffing their arms not far away. When they were drinking, they spat on the ground. She vaguely heard them talking about fighting and killing. One look and she could tell that they were gangsters. Her greedy beautiful eyes became deep and her oval face revealed a ruthless expression. She covered her face with a scarf and lowered her head as she walked over. In front of a small table by the river, He Longine felt that someone was staring at her. She took out a mirror and looked at her face. She glanced at the lively night stand reflected in the mirror and saw a figure that was disappearing quickly. She was stunned. What's wrong? Xiao Hanya asked in a deep voice when he saw that her expression was strange. He Longine stood up and said to him, I can't bear to see you get hurt. I'll go buy medicine for you. She stood up and left. Xiao Hanya looked at her figure thoughtfully, but the smile in his cold eyes was thick. He Longine inspected the night market, walked around, bought some medicine, and even brought back some firecrackers. When she put them on the table, Xiao Hanya's silent black eyes were even more meaningful. He asked, how do you want to play? About that. He Longine held her chin, and her other hand touched the table mischievously. Just then, the boss brought the dishes over. She picked up her chopsticks and started eating, saying, hurry up and eat. After eating, we can get things done. Oh. Miss He is going to pull me onto the boat. Xiao Hanya said. He looked at her eating quickly, but her actions were elegant, completely different from those hypocritical women. He Longine listened and handed him a bottle of beer in a forthright manner. She said, brother, drink up. Don't stand on ceremony. Xiao Hanya heard her call him, brother. His black eyes narrowed slightly. No one knew what he was thinking. He said, how would I dare to call Miss He brother? I can still run errands for you. Although he said this, he could still catch the slyness in her eyes. Suddenly, he was somewhat looking forward to what she wanted to do. Chapter 62. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 63. Have you been defiled by them? Author. Purple Peony Machine Translation. After the two finished their supper, Helan Jean stood up and stretched. She elegantly took her coat and put it on. Rubbing her wrist, she stuffed the firecracker into his arms and whispered to him, "Remember what I said." "Okay," Xiao Hanye replied. Nan Feng, who was eating sunflower seeds in the dark, silently threw them away. He scratched his head and felt a little depressed. His master was someone who could earn tens of millions of dollars in a minute. Now, he was wasting his time here with a little girl. Just eating this stall alone cost him hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay. Helan Jean left alone and hit the bar. She covered her head and said, "I feel dizzy after drinking too much. What should I do?" "Little girl, are you feeling very uncomfortable? Come, let Big Brother send you home." At this moment, those ruffians surrounded her and said to her in a wretched manner. Helan Jean listened and nodded happily. She then shook her head in a panic and said, Are you bad people?" "Huh, little sister, don't be afraid. Big Brothers are good people," they said and wanted to rush over, but she stopped them. Helan Jean looked at them warily and her body swayed as she narrowed her eyes at them. She said, "You're really good people." As she walked, they saw that she was tall and slender. She did not wear makeup on her face, but she was delicate and beautiful. They whistled and felt an itch in their hearts. They quickly followed and said, "Tonight, brothers will have a good time." Helan Jean walked in front. In a remote alley, she suddenly went in. Ugh! She leaned against the wall and vomited. A few ruffians rushed in. They immediately took off their clothes and pounced on her. When they got close to her, they vaguely felt a pain under their bodies. Ah! The man gritted his teeth in pain. He saw Helan Jean bend over and lean against the wall. She pushed her hand back. The toothpick she had just taken from the stall stabbed into his body. Without waiting for him to resist, she used force and the entire toothpick sank into his body. Bang! She turned around and kicked with her long legs, sending him flying and knocking the people behind him onto the ground. Without waiting for them to react, she threw a punch and stepped on their chests, knocking them out with a loud bang. A white BMW slowly approached. He could vaguely hear Helan Jean's scream, which echoed in the alley. Hiroshua braked and stopped by the side of the road. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, circled to the back seat, picked up the fruit knife, and put it into her bag. Hiroshua approached cautiously. She noticed that there was no one around and no cameras, so she quickened her pace. When she approached the alley, she saw a few ruffians lying on the ground in disheveled clothes. They seemed to be exhausted after being satisfied and were lying on the ground to sleep for a while. Helan Jean's figure was hiding in a dark corner, her body constantly trembling. "No, don't come over." Helan Jean sensed that someone was approaching. She hurriedly shifted her body and said. Looking at Helan Jean's flustered and choked up appearance, the coldness in Hiroshua's eyes deepened. She slowly approached and softly said, "Ah Jean, it's me. Xiao Shui." Helan Jean heard her voice and raised her head to look at her. Instantly, tears welled up in her eyes. She sobbed and said, "Quick, take me away. Xiao Shui, I'm scared, I'm so scared." Hiroshua stepped forward and hugged Helan Jean tightly. "Have you been defiled by them?" Hiroshua asked in a low voice. Helan Jean hurriedly shook her head, grabbed her coat and said, "No, there's no such thing." "Ah Jean, don't be afraid. Didn't I come? As long as you wait for a while, you'll be free immediately," Hiroshua said in a low voice. Seeing the panic in Helanjin's eyes, she laughed mockingly. Stupid woman, did she really think that she was here to save her? She had spent a lot of money to invite these ruffians to defile her. If Lu Zifan came to witness it, everything would be over. Chapter 63. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 64's strange smile made her scalp tingle. Author. Purple Peony Machine Translation. As long as Helanjin died and Tang Jilin became infertile, the He family would belong to her in the future. The secrets that Lu Zifan wanted could be easily obtained. Because of this, she had a murderous intent toward Helanjin. What do you mean? Helanjin asked nervously and confusedly. Ruoxue reached into her bag and took out a fruit knife. Without hesitation, she stabbed it toward Helanjin. At this moment, the sound of firecrackers suddenly came from outside. Crackle, crackle, it woke up all the residents who were sleeping in the middle of the night. After the firecrackers were lit, a thick smoke rushed toward him, and Helanjin suddenly grabbed Ruoxue's wrist. Ruoxue was distracted by the sound of firecrackers, and Helanjin grabbed her wrist tightly. Before she could react, Helanjin stabbed her wrist fiercely, and blood splashed out and dyed her wrist and clothes red. Ruoxue widened her beautiful eyes, and her fair oval face was pale and bloodless. She looked at Helanjin's strange smile in fear, and her scalp went numb. What are you doing? Ah, Jean. Tang Jilin suddenly appeared and ran over to support Helanjin. Wenqing stood there, unable to believe that Ruoxue was still holding the fruit knife with the hilt in her hand. Wenqing wished that his daughter would be stabbed and maimed, especially the thing that she had asked him to sign. He still did not know what it was. It was enough for such a stupid daughter to die, but she still wanted to harm her parents. Why did you kill me? Helanjin lowered her head and looked at the fruit knife stabbed into her body. She looked at Ruoxue in disbelief. Ruoxue panicked and pulled out the fruit knife. The knife fell to the ground with a clang. She grabbed Tang Jilin's arm and said, "Mom, I didn't stab sister. It was her. She stabbed herself. She wanted to harm me." Ruoxue felt a sense of fear welling up in her heart. She felt afraid, as if she had gone the wrong way. Xiaoxue. Tang Jilin listened to her denial. She turned her head in disbelief. Looking at her adopted daughter whom she had raised, she shook her head and said, "I usually love you so much. How could you do such a thing?" Helanjin stood there. She closed her almond-shaped eyes and took a deep breath. She said, "She took a knife for me back then. Now she stabbed me. From then on, we don't owe each other anything. I don't owe her anything anymore." She wanted everyone to know that Ruoxue had stabbed her, and they would be even. She didn't need to be kidnapped by morality anymore. Ruoxue was so angry that she cried. She stomped her feet and said, "Helanjin, why did you hurt me? Why?" This kind of crazy feeling was scratching at her heart. She clearly didn't do it, but no one believed her. "Mom, they said that they're Xiaoxue's friends. Why do you think she invited me to the alley?" Helanjin's voice was very soft. When they weren't paying attention, she kicked the ruffian who had fainted. It happened to hit the one she had stabbed with a toothpick. He woke up from the pain. "Miss, save me." The ruffian saw Ruoxue and subconsciously asked her for help. Tang Jilin saw the situation and looked at Ruoxue in confusion. She noticed that her face was pale and she looked flustered. I don't know him." Ruoxue gritted her teeth and looked at Helanjin hatefully. She felt that she had jumped into the trap Helanjin had set up, allowing her true colors to be revealed bit by bit. No, she could not lose. How could she lose to a woman as stupid as Helanjin? Helanjin looked at her flustered appearance and grabbed her tightly, not allowing Ruoxue to move. She pressed her lips to her ear and said in a low voice, "Ruoxue, the knife you stabbed tonight, we're done. You won't be so lucky next time." He Longjin said coldly, her fingertips poking her chest. Chapter 64 You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 65. A slap that sent her flying. Author. Purple Peony Machine Translation. He Ruoshua looked at her in pain and realized that He Longjin's gaze was abnormally cold. It was as if a cold sword had stabbed into her heart, causing her to shiver all over. She realized that He Longjin was different now. Only now did she feel fear. She could deny that she had not stabbed He Longjin, but she could not deny that she had hired people to rape He Longjin. As long as they spoke, she would be finished. She might be chased out of the He family. She glared hatefully at He Longjin. She felt that her life was going to be ruined by He Longjin. When I was young, I took a knife for you and almost lost my life. But you deliberately framed me. He Longjin, you. Why didn't I see your true colors earlier? He Ruoshua was so angry that her body was trembling. If she had known this would happen, she would not have wasted her breath. She would have stabbed He Longjin to death and stripped her of her clothes. After she died, her body would still be ruined by others. Unfortunately, He Ruoshua appeared with a fruit knife in her hand. If she had not gone to military school, she would have been stabbed to death. Now that the knife had come, she no longer owed He Ruoshua anything. Frame me. He Longjin listened and took half a step back. She raised her hand and slapped hard. With a slap, He Ruoshua fell to the ground. She dragged the ruffian over and said, "Tell me, who asked you to invite me here?" Yes, it's her. The ruffian was stabbed by her toothpick and was in great pain. Now that she had stepped on him, in order to save his life, he pointed at He Ruoshua in a panic. He Ruoshua was bleeding from the corner of her mouth. She crawled up in pain and looked at Tang Jilin with fear in her eyes. She gritted her teeth and crawled up. She looked at He Longjin who was crying her heart out and said, "Ah Jin, if you wanted to chase me away, you should have said so earlier. Why did you set a trap for me? You hate me, don't you? Okay. I'm going to die in front of you now. Can I die?" He Ruoshua cried and said. She turned around and slammed into the wall. Oh.org instantly, her head was bleeding. When she fell, Tang Jilin ran over and hugged her. She slapped her hard and said, "Xiaoshua, silly child, what on earth are you doing? Ah Jin, have you had enough? Do you really want our He family to be destroyed? If it wasn't for you, how could others climb onto our heads and harm us? Now you don't even distinguish right from wrong, do you?" Tang Jilin was angry. "If Xiaoshua has something to do today, don't come back for the rest of your life," Tang Jilin said ruthlessly. He Ruoshua was being hugged by her. Her sinister eyes were full of pride. She raised her head and looked at He Longjin provocatively. With tears flowing down her face, she said, "Godmother, don't scold her. It's all my fault." He Longjin stood there with a cold smile. She didn't expect to drive He Ruoshua out of the He family tonight, but she wanted to let them see He Ruoshua's true colors. She also wanted to test her parents. How important was He Ruoshua in their hearts? In comparison, his mother did not feel sorry for her biological daughter when she was injured. Now, He Ruoshua pretended to knock her head down and hugged her tightly instead. He Longjin was so depressed that she felt uncomfortable. She stubbornly turned around and did not turn around to leave. "He Longjin, if you dare to leave, I will pretend that I don't have a daughter like you in the future," Tang Jilin said. Unfortunately, her threats could not bring He Longjin back. She hated that she did not live up to her expectations. She got up and wanted to chase after him, but He Ruoshua pestered her. She hugged her and said, "Mom, I." He Ruoshua was so excited that she fainted in Tang Jilin's arms. Only Tang Jilin was the best use of the He family. If she could not get the secrets from He Longjin, then she had to start with Tang Jilin. Chapter 65 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 66 So this is what Miss He likes. Author. Purple Peony Machine Translation When these things happened, there were quite a number of people who stuck their heads out to watch. White Lotus Flower, snatching someone else's man and stabbing her in the middle of the night. This Miss He is suffering too much while she's alive. How pitiful. The people who were woken up by the sound of firecrackers were all watching and pointing. Very soon, someone posted the photo of Hiroshua stabbing He Lanjin on the internet. However, the police swarmed over and forcefully took those ruffians away. Hiroshua was anxious, but she had already pretended to be unconscious and could not get up to stop them. She could only watch helplessly as the police took them all away. He Lanjin might be strong, but after she was stabbed, the attitude of her parents towards her and Hiroshua broke her heart even more. Ever since she was young, she had let Hiroshua handle everything. Now, even her parents. It made her heart turn cold. Thinking of this, she took out a blood bag from her sweater and threw it into the trash can. Help me investigate the true cause of death of Hiroshua's parents that year. Also, why was she there coincidentally when I was kidnapped and assassinated that night? He Lanjin made a phone call and said in a low voice. She had a lot of doubts and needed to find the answer. In fact, she had suspected it before, but she was afraid that she was overthinking things. Moreover, Hiroshua had indeed taken a knife for her. Therefore, ever since Hiroshua moved into the He family, she had tried her best to give the best to Hiroshua, but she did not expect that in the end. She actually got. While she was deep in thought, she vaguely heard a familiar voice. She looked over and saw Lu Zifan's figure. She subconsciously hid in the dark. He walked over and stopped. Don't worry. I will get the He family's secrets as soon as possible. Don't worry. He Lanjin has completely fallen in love with me. The He family is just around the corner, Lu Zifan said. He Lanjin stood in the dark. Midnight was too quiet, so every word he said reached her ears. After making the call, Lu Zifan raised his wrist in frustration. He looked at the time and said, Hiroshua, that idiot, why did you ask me to come here in the middle of the night? As soon as he finished speaking, Secretary Yang rushed over and said to him, Young Master Lu, Miss He is on the news. What did He Lanjin do this time? Lu Zifan asked casually. He reached out and tugged at his tie. Secretary Yang's expression flickered. He said in a low voice, It's not He Lanjin, it's Hiroshua. Someone took a photo of her stabbing Miss He. I don't know the exact situation, but the netizens are already starting to flesh her out. F***ck. Lu Zifan had always been gentle and refined, but now he was swearing. He said coldly, What's the situation now? Again. I found out about your passion with her. Secretary Yang wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Ever since he found out about Lu Zifan and Hiroshua, he felt that Lu Zifan was blind. How could he find a woman as stupid as a pig? F***ck, stupid woman. Lu Zifan was silent for a few seconds before he cursed. He turned around, got into the car, and drove away. So Lu Zifan wants to swallow the He family. Someone is manipulating it from behind. Who wants the He family? He Lanjin said in a low voice. She took out her phone and hacked into Lu Zifan's phone. She just happened to see a few naked photos of him and Zhao Yui. He Lanjin felt that the photos of their loving bed were like a strong electric light, blinding her eyes. Just as she was about to turn it off, a large hand reached out and snatched her phone away. You. He Lanjin looked up and saw Qiao Hanya standing in front of her, holding her phone in his hand. She asked in a low voice, So Miss He likes this kind of thing. He Lanjin's face turned red. She reached out and wanted to snatch the phone. He was one head taller than her. When she raised her hand, she pounced on him and pressed her soft body against his body. She grabbed his arm and wanted to snatch the phone. She did not expect to see such an inappropriate scene in Lu Zifen's phone. After all, she did not want to see such a thing. Hiss. Xiao Hanya did not expect her to pounce over to grab the phone and press her body against his body. Chapter 66. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 67. Women, Don't Move. Author. Purple Peony Machine Translation. Give me back my phone, He Longjin said coldly. She still needed to check Lu Zifen's IP call just now to find out who the other party was. The phone call just now conveyed a very important message. Someone was manipulating the situation behind the scenes and wanted to destroy the He family through Lu Zifen's hands. But what exactly was the He family that other people were determined to get? It probably had nothing to do with property because He Wenqing was a coward. No matter how big the family business was, he couldn't support it. Therefore, the He family was basically an empty shell. Woman, don't move. Xiao Hanya's magnetic voice was hoarse, and his dark eyes darkened. He reached out and grabbed her waist, pressing her down to stop her from persuading him. He Longjin was shocked by the man's burning body. She realized something, and her body froze in his arms. She was about to speak, but she heard the sound of a car. With a squeak, Lu Zifen's car stopped beside her. Young Master Lu, do you really want to get involved in Miss He's muddy water? Secretary Yang followed behind nervously, obviously very confused. The negative news that he had spent so much effort to suppress was once again stirred up by He Ruoxue. Lu Zifen really wanted to strangle her to death, but he could not do so now. He Ruoxue was the only one who could get in touch with the He family's secrets. Without him, his plan would fall through the cracks. Your fiancé is here. Xiao Hanya lowered his head, his thin lips pressed against her ear as he said in a low voice. When the man's sexy thin lips spoke, they moved and brushed past her ear. A numbness spread. It was as if she had been drugged. Her body was sucked out of the air, and she was grabbed by his waist and lifted into the air. Ah, what are you doing? He Longjin was hugged tightly by him. She was so shocked that she grabbed his shoulders tightly, her legs wrapped around the man's strong waist. Afraid that Lu Zifen would discover her, she did not dare to move. She was carried by Xiao Hanya. When Lu Zifen heard a familiar voice, he subconsciously looked over. Xiao Hanya looked at her legs wrapped around his waist. He casually supported her body and carried her away in large strides. He walked very quickly and walked straight forward. He did not turn a corner and directly bumped into Lu Zifen. Hiss. Lu Zifen stood there and vaguely heard He Longjin's voice. He wanted to see who the woman in the man's arms was. Xiao Hanya carried her and walked over, pushing him away. He walked past him arrogantly, as if he was a piece of trash that was in his way and was kicked away by him. Young Master Lu, are you okay? Secretary Yang quickly went forward to support him. Lu Zifen raised his hand and didn't let him support him. Instead, he stared at Xiao Hanya's back and said with narrowed eyes, "Did you see the person in his arms clearly?" "This. The night is too dark, I can't see clearly." Secretary Yang braced himself and said. Lu Zifen felt that something was wrong. He clearly heard He Longjin's voice just now. Could it be that she was having an affair with a man in the middle of the night? The more he thought about it, the more upset he felt. He thought about how He Longjin had never taken the initiative to contact him, as if he was nothing. Young Master Lu, look. Secretary Yang pointed to the front and saw He Wenqing and Tang Jilin carrying He Ruoxue into the car. Then, the radio rang, waking up many people who were sleeping. Don't miss it. The police suspect that there is a young master of the Lu family doing business here. The radio was very loud and deafening. Lu Zifen's face darkened. He felt that he had been played by someone. He clenched his fists and turned around to get into the car. Xiao Hanya carried He Longjin and left. She stared at Lu Zifan, who had been knocked down by him. She was so happy that she couldn't close her mouth. She jumped out of his arms. When she heard the broadcast, she straightened her chest and said, "You did this." Chapter 67. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 67. Hidden Edge. Author Purple Peony. Machine translation. He Longjin listened to the loud noise on the radio and suddenly laughed. Lu Zifan will definitely be angered to death, He Longjin said in a low voice. She tried her best to hide her emotions and was ignored by her parents. No matter how strong she was, it was inevitable that she would be sad and disappointed. However, she knew how to control her emotions since she was young and not be seen through. Otherwise, they would not describe her as stupid like a pig. When she was young, she just wanted Hiroshue to hide her edge. The human heart is unpredictable. There are some people who don't need to take it to heart. Xiao Hanya looked at her deeply and could see the struggle and pain in her heart. Tonight, she seemed to have seen the different He Longjin. She clearly knew that Hiroshue wanted to frame her, but she deliberately fell into the other party's trap. She could not help but have some expectations in her heart. If Hiroshue had not taken out her knife, perhaps she would not be so upset. A person who had saved her since she was young, grew up together with her, and treated her as a close friend, but stole her things. He wanted to ruin her reputation. He did not even know when, but he had brainwashed her parents and forcefully pushed her away from their hearts. She originally had a happy family, but because of Hiroshue's intervention, she became an orphan with no one to rely on. "I'm fine, I'm used to it." He Longjin laughed softly, putting away her hurt expression and taking 2 steps forward. Seeing that he did not follow, she turned around and grabbed his wrist to drag him away. Xiao Hanya looked at her holding his wrist, and he struggled to free himself. She only wanted to drag him away, she did not think that she would hold his hand. Only when he struggled did she realize the awkwardness. He Longjin wanted to explain, but his small hand was held tightly by him. Xiao Hanya held her hand with a wide and thick palm. Seeing that she stopped walking, he turned around in confusion and asked, "Why, haven't you played enough?" He Longjin struggled a few times, but he was very strong. No matter how hard she struggled, she couldn't shake him off. "How did you find them?" He Longjin was puzzled. She just wanted to make things difficult for him, but she didn't expect Xiao Hanya to really find her parents on time. Xiao Hanya held her little hand. The man's body was scorching hot, warming her cold little hand. His magnetic voice rang out, "I'm just reminding him that President Huang's people want to expose an unspeakable matter." Haha. He Longjin listened and laughed out loud instantly. Xiao Hanya was infected by her laughter, and the corners of his mouth could not help but curve upwards. The midnight moon quietly hid in the clouds. The dim streetlights pulled their figures to a slender length. Their figures overlapped each other, as if they were about to intertwine. I'll go get the car." The two walked for a while and went back to the roadside. When they walked to the car, she looked at his big palm and said in a low voice. Xiao Hanya replied with an "okay." He reached out his hand to block her and said, "I'll drive." "The injury on your hand?" He Longjin looked at his palm. Xiao Hanya opened the passenger door and motioned for her to get in the car. He Longjin was not pretentious. When she got into the car, she saw him stretch out his hand to pull the seatbelt and help her fasten it. He Longjin was stunned. She was inexplicably a little overwhelmed by the favor. Her heart was beating very fast, like a little deer bumping randomly. She quickly took out her phone and scrolled through the news. Xiao Hanya drove back to Scenery Garden. The two of them walked side by side. He Longjin wanted to speak. "It's your business. Don't alert the enemy first. If necessary, grab his vital points. One move will definitely hit him," Xiao Hanya said in a deep voice. He Longjin was a little surprised. She lifted her head to look at Xiao Hanya. She found it hard to believe that he actually knew what she was thinking. The two of them had a tacit understanding. She could not help but think of one thing. The last time I was hit by a car, could it be that you did it? An idea flashed through He Longjin's mind. She recalled that night when she wanted to cater to the news and commit suicide, she was hit by a mysterious car. Why did it look more and more like what he did? Chapter 68. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 68 gave her a childish gift offer. Purple Peony Machine Translation. Xiao Hanya heard her question and could not help but laugh. He looked at her deeply, raised his handsome eyebrows and said, "What do you think? Xiao Hanya, you dare to bump into me? Are you asking for a beating?" He Longjin took off and chased after him. Xiao Hanya looked at her as if she wanted to kill him, but he did not avoid her. Instead, he opened his arms and hugged the figure that was running towards him. "You!" He Longjin was stunned when he suddenly hugged her. He touched her head and whispered, "Don't be sad for unrelated people. Even if the sky falls, I will help you." Hearing his words, she was stunned and could not come back to her senses for a long time. What surprised her even more was that Xiao Hanya actually understood her. Using the car accident and tonight's incident as an example, she only said one sentence and he was thoughtful. Not everyone had this kind of tacit understanding. While she was stunned, she heard the man laugh out loud. "Catch!" Xiao Hanya took the car keys and threw them at her. He Longjin subconsciously reached out to catch them and chased after them. However, she saw him flash into the study room. She curled her lips and turned around to return to her room. However, she saw Han Beicheng leaning on the side with a megaphone in his hand. He looked at her helplessly. "Mr. Han, good night." He Longjin saw the megaphone in his hand and thought of tonight's broadcast. Before Han Beicheng came to settle the score with her, she rushed into her room. After returning to her room to take a shower, she wiped her hair and climbed onto the bed. However, she saw something placed in front of the bedside table. She reached out to pick it up, but she heard a "pa" sound. The thing suddenly split open. When she was shocked, she saw something spurting out. Ah! She threw it away and found that the thing that spurted out had turned into bubbles in the air. Under the lights, the colorful bubbles were extremely beautiful. However, other than her and Xiao Hanya, there was only Han Beicheng in Jing Garden. There was no need to doubt that the thing was sent by Xiao Hanya. Childish. He Longjin laughed softly, but she stared at the colorful bubbles floating in the air. She looked at the figure outside the French window and said in a low voice, "Thank you, I'm fine." The figure outside the window did not make a sound. It just left with a "hmm." He Longjin climbed onto the bed and looked at the bubbles that were still floating in the air. She stretched out her finger and poked lightly. The bubbles were punctured, but a heart-shaped mark was left on her fingertip. She stared at the heart-shaped mark on her fingertip. Thump, thump, thump. Her heart beat even faster. She was at a loss for what to do. She quickly turned off the light and crawled into the quilt. Her face was very red, and she tossed and turned, but she could not fall asleep. This was the only time in the past 23 years that she had been coaxed like a child. He Longjin had mixed feelings. She looked at the heart-shaped mark on her fingertip and gently wiped it. A burning sensation came from her fingertip. She turned over and lay on the bed, hugging the pillow. Ah! She flipped over and fell onto the carpet. She lifted her long legs playfully and quietly climbed up. However, she received a call from Qin Nan and revealed a very big piece of information. She said, "Ah Jean, I was targeted by a rich tycoon. He even gave me a sports car worth more than 100 million yuan. It's really hard to be handsome." While He Longjin was talking to Qin Nan, in the bedroom next door, Xiao Hanya suddenly sneezed after taking a shower. Master, are you all right? Han Beiqing hid the megaphone properly and walked in. When he heard him sneeze, he quickly went forward and asked, I'll get the doctor to come over. There's no need, Qiao Hanye said in a low voice. He walked to the side and opened the information to look for it. He said in a low voice, go and check this. Han Beiqing looked at the information and casually flipped through 2 pages. He asked, Master, are you suspecting that someone is using the Lu family and wants to swallow the He group? But the He group is not outstanding in Jiangqing. In comparison, the Lu family has more prospects. Why is that person targeting the He family? Check, Qiao Hanye said in a low voice. Yes, Han Beiqing replied in a low voice. Although he did not understand why Qiao Hanye wanted to interfere with the He family's affairs, he did not ask further. When Han Beiqing left, Qiao Hanye said in a low voice, wait, master. He turned around in confusion. Qiao Hanye turned around and took a pen to write a few words on the paper. He handed it to him and said, check it out together. Go back and forth carefully. Yes. Han Beiqing stared at the name and already understood. Chapter 69 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 69 was broken in a second author. Purple Peony Machine Translation. The next morning, He Lanjin woke up early. When she went downstairs, she yawned and rolled up her sleeves out of boredom. When she saw a video, she ran into the kitchen on a whim. Her eyes lit up and she showed off her skills. Mr. Qiao, come and have a taste of my cooking. He Lanjin had been tossing and turning for 2 hours. When she smelled the rich fragrance, she was about to scoop up a bowl of soup and drink it. When she saw Qiao Hanye go downstairs, she waved at him. Qiao Hanye looked at her bun-shaped hair and loose hoodie. She looked relaxed but full of energy. That, you made this? Qiao Hanye looked at the soup and asked. He Lanjin held her chin and pushed the bowl in front of him, saying, it's a secret recipe passed down from the He family. If you drink it, you won't forget it for the rest of your life. Qiao Hanye looked at her in confusion. He picked up the soup and finished it in 1 gulp. Then, his expression changed. After finishing the bowl of soup, his whole body was burning hot, as if there was a prehistoric power surging over. The man's masculinity was stirred up. His handsome face instantly darkened. He looked at the pot of precious medicinal herbs in the pot. How is it? He Lanjin saw that his expression changed and reached out to scoop up the bowl, ready to taste it. Seeing this, Qiao Hanye reached out and held her hand. He snatched the bowl from her, pursed his lips and drank it all. He said in a low voice, not bad. Leave some for me. He Lanjin's phone rang. When she went to answer the call, she did not forget to turn around and remind him. This was her first time making soup. How could she let him have it for free? Seeing that she had turned around and walked out, Qiao Hanye carried the soup and stuffed it into Han Beiqing's arms. He said, take care of it. Master, this. Han Beiqing was depressed, but he still carried the entire pot upstairs and secretly took a bite. Qiao Hanye's entire body was burning with unbearable heat. 2 bowls of nourishing strong yang soup entered his stomach, and every cell in his body was clamoring, as if in the next second, he was going to sow the spring sunshine of March in the dry winter season. After answering the phone, He Lanjin turned around and returned. She saw that the hall in Ruoda was empty and there was no one there. Other than the television still playing, there was almost no sound. She held the remote control and was about to turn off the television. However, she heard the host say, all right, today's strong yang yin nourishing soup method has ended. I hope it can help the unfortunate families with impotence and premature ejaculation. If there are no problems in this aspect, please do not try it, or else you will bear the consequences. Pfft. He Lanjin shook it and spat out the water she had just drunk. It turned out that she had a whim in the morning and learned how to make soup from television. She even made a mistake. Mr. Qiao. He Longine threw away the remote control and ran upstairs. She pushed the door open and entered his bedroom. She heard the sound of running water coming from the bathroom. She stood far away and asked at the top of her voice, "Are you okay?" Xiao Hanye was in the bathroom. He took a cold shower and lowered the burning fire all over his body. He was about to put on his clothes. He heard her beautiful voice coming from outside the door. It broke his cultivation in a second. "Damn woman." Xiao Hanye threw away his clothes and stood in front of the shower head, letting the cold water fall on him. The air seemed to be filled with her aura, which made the fire in his body burn more and more fiercely. He Longine was suspicious. She walked to the bathroom door and knocked on it. "Mr. Xiao." He Longine knocked on the door in fear, afraid that she might kill someone. The glass door opened. Xiao Hanye stood in front of her with a towel wrapped around his waist. The water dripped down his strong muscles like crystal clear pearls. He Longine swallowed her saliva. Her mouth was parched, and she regretted knocking on the door. Just as she was about to turn around and steal it, he grabbed her wrist. Chapter 70. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 70. If you want to marry, you should marry the best man in the world. Author. Purple Peony Machine Translation. He Longine was held by his wrist. She was taken to the side by him. She could feel his body temperature burning her skin like a raging fire. Oh! Her back was against the table. The man's tall body stood in front of her and wrapped her tightly. He bent over to her. He Longine was extremely nervous. She grabbed the edge of the table and leaned back. Just as she was about to raise her head to hit him, he lowered his head and brushed his thin lips across her side of her face. His body went past her and reached behind her. "Help me test out a car," Xiao Hanye said in a deep voice. A car key was handed to her palm. He held her small hand and ran his fingertips through her hair, gently rubbing it a few times. "Oh, okay." He Longine's heart was like a deer's. She took the car key and ran past him in small steps. When she closed the door, her palm was sweating. Only then did she realize that her back was actually covered in cold sweat in the middle of winter. "What on earth am I thinking?" He Longine reached out and patted her cheek to sober herself up a little. She went back to her room and changed into a set of clean clothes. She took the car keys and went downstairs. When she walked into the garage, she saw a brand new sports car parked there. She pressed the car keys and walked over when she heard the sound. What a good car! She could tell at a glance that it was a good car and got into the car excitedly. When she fastened her seatbelt, she saw a bouquet of roses placed in the front passenger seat. The fragrance of the flowers filled the air in the car. He Longine was very confused. She stepped on the gas and drove away from Scenery Garden. She happened to see the doctor, Sheng Wanji, rushing inside. He Longine came to the city and heard many people discussing Hiruoshue's deeds. Needless to say, Hiruoshue had been too popular recently. Her popularity had even caught up with the top celebrities in the entertainment circle, but unfortunately, they were all negative. "Ah, Jean." A gentle voice sounded as if it was soft to the bone. She turned around and saw a noble woman dressed in plain clothes. Her graceful makeup made her look as quiet and beautiful as an orchid in the valley. "Aunt." He Longine turned around and saw the stunning her. She strode forward and asked happily, "The weather is so cold. Why are you here?" Shen Biqiong was as light as a chrysanthemum. Although she was already middle-aged, her temperament was so elegant that one could not look away. "You know it's cold, yet you're still wearing so little. Girls need to learn how to keep warm. Otherwise, when you get old, the root of the illness will fall. Let's see if you're still mischievous." As Shen Biqiong spoke, she took off her scarf and wrapped it around her neck. She pressed her hand to stop her from moving. He Longines' face was full of smiles. She coquettishly snuggled into her embrace and said, even if I'm frozen, don't I still have you to take care of me? Your uncle and your brother are always talking about how they want to visit you in Jiang City, but they can't find the time. Last night, I dreamed that you were injured, so I came to see you. I told Aunt that recently, he won. Shen Biqiong asked. Shen Biqiong suddenly stopped, and her smile froze. She immediately changed her words and said, are your father and the others treating you well? Yes, do you think I've gained weight? He Longine heard this and quickly spread her arms and spun around in front of her. Shen Biqiong looked at her face full of joy, and her eyes were a little lonely. She held her hand and said, that's good. Isn't this Miss He? So pitiful. At this time, someone recognized He Longine and whispered softly. Shen Biqiong's ears were sharp. After hearing this, she quickly pushed He Longine away and walked over to ask what was going on. The two girls were very gossipy, so she immediately spoke and even took out her phone. After she saw it, her entire face turned green. He actually dared to use you to form a marriage alliance. How dare he? Shen Biqiong said as she walked out in a hurry. He Longine saw that the situation was not good and quickly ran forward to hug her. Aunt, please don't be angry. How can I not be angry? Our Jean is beautiful and smart. Even if she wants to marry, she should marry the best man in the world. Who does He Wenqing think he is? He actually forced you to form a marriage alliance. With this loose looks, he's not even fit to carry your shoes. I want to tell your uncle to come and skin He Wenqing. Yes, yes, yes. Tell your uncle and your big brother to kill him.